What is up, my Squirtleites? It is I, your king, welcoming you back to more Let's Play Destiny. Today, we are going to be taking a little bit of a break from Season of the Seraph stuff to go on another adventure. Much like we did with the Duality Dungeon, we are going to be picking up the dungeon for this season from somebody, except for this time it's Ikora, so let's approach her really quickly.
Yes, Guardian.
And once again, we got dialogue. Guardian, Ikora, acknowledge you as you approach her before producing a holotab report from her robes. My hidden has been tracking a series of temporal distortions moving across Mars. Everything seemed benign until they stopped near an old Seraph complex in the northern wastes. Ikora waits a moment for you to finish reading the holotab brief. As you can see, the Seraph complex then sprang to life for the first time since the collapse, no less. Ikora looks stern. We'd be fools not to take that as an ill omen. Ikora shifts before speaking again. Osiris already wants to run headlong into an investigation, but I don't want him chasing leads into unsteady ground. Ikora's face softens as you see her she sees your reaction. Excuse me. I worry about him hurting himself. I would have denied his request to be involved at all if Anna wasn't sure this was important. Ikora takes the holotab as you return it to her. That's why I want you to go in his stead. He trusts you, and that was the only way he'd stay out of the field. So let's take this. We need to complete the Spire of the Watcher dungeon. So let's head right on over there and get this thing started. And just like that, welcome to the future, everybody. Let's get started.
You've landed at the source of the complex's arc supply. Centuries in Martian rust have done this place no kindness. Our window of opportunity is short. Arc surges destabilize the complex, and Vex are breaching the command matrix. Go.
All right, Osiris's intro is done. Now it's my turn. So the first part of this episode was recorded back when all these other episodes were recorded, almost 3 years ago. This portion of the video, however, and also part 2 of this dungeon, I only recorded this footage about 2 months ago, so welcome to the most recent, up-to-date gameplay you're going to get in this entire Let's Play. Now, there's a very specific reason I did so, and it's only going to apply to this dungeon, so it'll make sense when I talk about it later. But firstly, I want to actually go over Spire of the Watcher itself, because this is an incredibly mechanically simple dungeon. It's actually just the combat and the density of enemies and the oppressive damage that you receive that makes this dungeon what it is. I wouldn't call it the easiest dungeon by any stretch of the imagination, but knowing what to do here could not be more simple. Now, this opening encounter, like most opening encounters, is an introduction to mechanics. What you do is you kill a Minotaur. They're going to drop a pool on the ground that's going to give you the Arctrician buff. You are going to take this Arctrician buff, run around, and you are going to shoot nodes with it, these arc nodes. After you shoot a node, you're then going to need to run to the next node in the chain, which is connected by these yellow wires running on the ground. You'll shoot that node, the wire turns blue, the connection is complete, and you just keep following this chain until all the nodes are completed. However, this time around, I am not going to be finishing the last node on the strings for a very specific reason we'll talk about in a minute. And in fact, I'll just talk about it at the end. But otherwise, that's it. That is the entire mechanic of this dungeon. It's in all 4 encounters. You just connect these strings together. You get the Arctician buff. It lasts for 45 seconds. You get about 5 seconds every time you shoot a node. If it ever runs out, you just go kill another Minotaur. There's nothing more to it than that. Of course, the difficulty comes in by the fact that you are constantly being harassed, harangued, and shot at by a bunch of enemies while doing this, so you have to deal with a lot of crowd control. In the boss fights in particular, you have to deal with the bosses harassing you. That is going to be a much bigger issue in the final boss fight, but otherwise, that's it. That's the dungeon. There's nothing more to it than that. Also, you're going to see right here, this node was glitched. This, like, never happens, by the way. I've run this dungeon more than a dozen times, and I think this is the only time I noticed where it just was not working. Really, honestly, could have just been an issue this one time I did it, but don't get used to that. It's actually usually very responsive. Anyway, bad luck, I know. Now I want to talk about why I am recording this footage so close to when it's coming out, and that is because this is the only time I'm ever going to be able to do this. Right before the release of the Edge of Fate expansion, we got a very special event called Rite of the Nine, and Rite of the Nine saw overhauls to all, well, not all, but 4 different dungeons throughout the game. They got some tweaks and changes to their core difficulty. They got an expert difficulty, a higher difficulty, meant for a greater challenge and better loot. And then they also got the explorer difficulty, which was specifically curated to teach newcomers about dungeon mechanics. If you have never actually done a dungeon before, because for solo players, these can still be prohibitive, especially players who are not super good at the game, this was a way of actually learning those mechanics. So that is why there are objective markers over the nodes, why the enemies don't hit as hard, why you're going to see that bosses have significantly reduced health, and why I am doing this entire thing on solo is because this mode is designed around that. It's curated for the solo experience and the teaching experience. I'm not really drawing attention to it much, but when like the Arctrician pools drop down, there's like a text box that pops up above it and explains what it is. So it's meant to be on the easy side. And you're not going to see this in future dungeon runs, just this time, because I wanted at least a chance to explain how this all works and show you this difficulty, but it's not going to happen again. Now, I'm completing all these nodes at the end because you complete them all at once, and you don't have to deal with supplicants. The encounter ends instantly and despawns all the enemies, but every time you complete a node in this encounter in particular, it spawns supplicants. They run around, try to blow you up. I think I accidentally completed one earlier, which is why there were at least a few supplicants running around. But if you can manage to just hold off and complete all 4 nodes at the same time, then you really don't have to deal with those things throughout the fight.
Peculiar. They were rivals in the Golden Age. This wasn't just a pillory site, it was a joint research facility, focused on extrasolar colonization efforts. The Soul Divisive have been scouring research logs. They were looking for something more than to imprison Rasputin's subminds.
Now, since we are playing this on a different difficulty, there have been a couple of changes made, and I will explain what those changes are here in a second. But the first thing you need to know, at least as far as difficulty is concerned, so just as an example, I did receive, I think, like 1 direct hit from a Cyclops earlier in that fight. While it may not have completely one-shot me at full health on normal difficulty, it would have gotten really close, but I think it only did like half my health on this difficulty, so there's your basis for the difficulty changes this time around. This is more of an in-between area. We're going to actually be grabbing a secret chest in this area as we go, but I want to explain a couple of things, a couple of differences here, again, with this Explorer difficulty. So those objective markers that were popping up over the Arc nodes, those are not in the original version of this. You're actually expected to know the path. I mean, you can always just follow the wires and it'll tell you where to go, but that can be kind of difficult and annoying and terrifying while you're constantly being harassed by a bunch of enemies. So this time around, it makes it a lot easier to just be like, oh, it's there, it's there, it's there, and you just shoot at them and as you go. Pretty much one of the only things that makes this version easier. However, there is also a big change to the first boss fight encounter, which we'll actually get into in part 2. Because yes, this dungeon is actually designed very similarly to Shattered Throne, where it's all traversals, and then there's 2 bosses back to back. The way that the traversals work, though, are a little bit different, of course, and the way the bosses work are a little bit different. They're very cool boss fights, don't get me wrong, although one of them is straight up ripped out of Garden of Salvation, at least in terms of its aesthetic. So that's a little bit... this dungeon, I don't know. I will be completely honest with you guys and say that I don't like this dungeon very much, and that is another reason why I chose to run it on this difficulty instead of the normal way. I will also admit that I'm also not the greatest at remembering the exact path to the nodes, but that's just because I think I've ran this dungeon the least out of, I would say, any dungeon in the game, actually. So it's not a huge favorite of mine. It's not like I don't know how this dungeon works. I don't want to be meandering too much, and I wanted an opportunity to show off this Explorer mode. As of this moment in time, Bungie has taken that difficulty out of the game. It would be awesome if they added it back in some way, but it was at least present during Rite of the Nine, and this was going to be my only opportunity to show it because this is the only one that really didn't receive significant changes in this difficulty mode or in its Rite of the Nine variant versus some of the other dungeons, which got changed a lot more and made them almost functionally different dungeons. So that's why I'm using this opportunity. But yeah, it's not my favorite, and I have to say, when it came out, I don't know if it was the most well-received dungeon in the world. I mean, I don't think there's a single dungeon that's ever come out and like players hated it. I don't think that's ever been true. But this one in particular, I think just kind of got an overwhelming, yeah, it's all right response. A big part of that, though, is also the weapon design. You saw that little tumbleweed that blew past at the beginning. There's a little bit of a cowboy aesthetic to this dungeon, mostly with the weapon design. All of the weapons in here are from the Tex Mechanica foundry, which is the same foundry that made The Last Word, The Chaperone, Dead Man's Tale.
Information stored here, but could it be linked to my visions? Why else would the witness be interested in these files?
And then the armor itself is literally a cowboy set. The Hunter Cloak and the Warlock and Titan helmets are literally cowboy hats. So there's a thing with that going on here too, which is kind of the main reason that, I mean, it's kind of why you got that little Easter egg at the beginning. But otherwise, it's actually not very cowboy at all because this couldn't be more futuristic. We're in like this incredibly high-tech sci-fi facility fighting possibly the least contemporary race in the entire game. So, yeah, it's still a good dungeon, though. I don't want to knock it or anything. I just want you guys to understand that this dungeon is not my favorite. Not my favorite at all, but we're still going to get through it together, and it's going to be relatively simple this time. All right, so for the second encounter, once again, you're completing strings, although only 2 strings per level this time. There are 3 levels to this encounter, and the strings kind of go in different orders. So the first time, they're going to kind of start at one end, and then they're going to go outwards around the tower, and then they're going to meet back in the middle on the other side. It's not going to be exactly that way every single time. You're going to have goblins spawn, which they're easy to deal with. You're going to have minotaurs spawn on both sides, and you're also going to have a pair of hydras, one that is basically meant to harass each node connector, because ideally, if you're running this in a group, you're going to have multiple people running around, and each one's going to be completing their own node, essentially, while like the third person deals with enemies or whatnot. And the hydras are mostly supposed to be there to just kind of harass those people trying to do their job. But they're also relatively easy to avoid in this encounter. I would say much more so than the Cyclopses were in the first encounter. Also, as you can see, I just one-shot it with Queensbreaker. I mean, I know this is an easier difficulty, but yeah, not really an issue to deal with when you can do that, you know, aside from the shield. But once we connect all of these nodes, it's going to activate a lift, and then we're going to start climbing. The Spire of the Watcher is literally just big tower. That's what it's all about. We're trying to get to the very top of this place before, well, I actually don't want to spoil anything, but you'll see how it all works out. But once we collect the last node, there's no reservations about completing the nodes this time because no supplicants are going to spawn. We go up the anti-grav lift, then on to the next level. Very, very simple. But again, the connection strings are slightly different. So this time, they are in a fenced-off area. If you try to walk through that arc field, it will actually kill you. So keep that in mind. However, notice, and this is the other thing I wanted to point out about this difficulty, notice that on my health bar, there isn't a darkness zone indicator. In normal mode, there is. If you die in here, you do have to restart the entire thing over, like any other dungeon. Whenever an encounter is started, if everyone's dead, it's a wipe. But not in Explorer mode. In Explorer mode, you're allowed to kind of just continue on regardless, and there's not really any consequences to it. Because, again, it's just trying to kind of teach you the basics of the dungeon while giving you very basic loot. So it's just, you know, just an opportunity for everybody to sort of play. And it's nice. I was very happy to see that Bungie put this in the game. Was this how I played Rite of the Nine for the most part? No. In fact, I am willing to say now this was actually the only mode that I played on Explorer because I was too busy running the highest difficulty trying to get all of the Adept loot. But wanted to give this a shot specifically for this Let's Plays. And yeah, it was very, very interesting. What you're seeing is my only solo run of this. And I mean, it's pretty much raw. I'm only going to be cutting out one of the damage phases for the final boss just to cut down on time, and you'll understand why once we get there. It's like, yes, they significantly reduce the health of the bosses, and if I was running this in a team of 3, we'd probably 1 phase every boss, but because I'm running solo, it's still 2 to 3 phases every single time. So, well, in fact, it's exactly 3 phases every single time. So it's not going to be the quickest thing in the world, but you know, I mean, it's still pretty straightforward. If I were to do this solo on normal difficulty, it would be like 6-7 phases, and yeah, nobody's got the time for that. All my previous solo attempts already kind of signified that when I think back to like Pit of Heresy and whatnot. I feel like Shattered Throne was really the only one that went super smoothly back when I was trying that out. I mean, my gosh, frickin' Prophecy was such a long-winded effort, and yeah, don't really want to put myself through that again for this Let's Play just to show off these dungeons, because that's not even really what these dungeons are all about. I mean, they're meant to be like light raids. They're raids that are meant for groups of 3 with much simpler mechanics, and that's really all there is to it. So yeah, definitely don't want to overcomplicate things here. But with completing that last node, all right, we are done, and we're going to get ourselves some loot and then continue climbing the tower. And once we get up to the very top, we're going to open an awning, and actually the next encounter is directly on top of us.
Vex Mine remains in this terminal like an open door. It's using the tower's arrays to connect with installations across Sol. This must be in preparation to imprison the submines.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for this episode of Let's Play Destiny. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you did it very much. In the next episode, we will finish off Spire the Watcher. See you all then.